being smart and making a lot of money, as a lot of people have accused me, don't necessarily go hand in hand, right? But I do think that if the only certainty about being the president of the United States is the uncertainty. You don't know what's coming next. And you've got to make an effort to always be learning, and you've got to make an effort to have at your disposal every possible tool, which this day and age includes technology. And I think that lack of understanding, of grasp of any technology whatsoever is hurting him in his approach. And I'll give you the perfect example, jobs.
Okay.
Right? There's, from the most basic, common sense perspective, how could it ever possibly be wrong for the President of the United States to sit down with the CEO of any company, particularly an industrial company,
right,
and convince them to build a factory and to hire people in that factory? And on a micromanaged basis, it's impossible to see anything wrong. On a macro basis, when you ask yourself what actually is going to happen in that factory, what technologies are they going to use, what is that going to gear them towards, unless you understand how the nature of work is changing and how this acceleration of technological change is changing
away from manufacturing towards the jobs.
And not just manufacturing, right? How we process information, how we automate automation. The point being that I'd be willing to bet every single one of these companies that are building these factories, those factories, and they still should do them, right? And I think indirectly he's benefiting those companies on a macro basis, but from the macro basis for the whole country, benefiting those companies, but on the macro basis for the whole country, every one of those companies that are going to be building new factories, their net employment is going to be lower once those factories are built than he even anticipates.
The new factories will have robots where they had humans in the past.
And they're just pushing them towards further automation, right? And further use of deep learning, machine learning, et cetera, right? It's inevitable. He couldn't stop it. But the problem I'm having with it is he doesn't understand the macro issues. He thinks he's creating more jobs when in essence that's not happening. And so where we're going to be as a country is that we're going to have a lot of displaced workers. The nature of work is changing. And it's not just going to be factory workers who are displaced. You know, it's going to be people that...
And you see that in the long-term employment statistics. You see the decline of manufacturing jobs going back decades, not just a couple of years, but not just pre or post NAFTA.
You and I have been talking technology for 15, 20 years, right?
You just called me old, I got that.
Yeah, I'm calling us both old, right? Or better, we're not old.
That's it.
The amount of change we're going to see over the next 5 years, 10 years, will dwarf everything that's happened over the last 30. We went from automating pen and paper, right, with spreadsheets, to connecting PCs into local area networks to, you know, connecting people
to each
locally,
other.
Locally, right, to connecting networks to get the internet, to getting the network effect of communicating people globally and allowing that communicating, getting that productivity.
And that really starts to happen about 2000, 98, 2000, right in there when the internet suddenly is getting into people's homes.
Blast off. And then we get to, you know, Facebook in 2004, you know, all the network effect to people, right? And to the Slacks and everything, the network effect in business, the Salesforce.com. But now we're introducing artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, neural networks, et cetera. So, and what that enables is the automation of automation, right? And so the people who were writing software, particularly at the lower end, unless you're doing these advanced things, they're gone, right? The people that
because the software's writing itself.
It's doing itself, right? It's just math. Right? All the people doing basketball analytics and saying, okay, we're going to, you know, this is what you do in this situation. Well, you can't anticipate, you can't look at every possible iteration. People can't do that. There aren't enough people, there's not enough time. Machine learning can look at every possible and consider every possible situation.
So it looks at the statistics of the shots, looks at where the players were, looks at what happened in the last 3 games, and can play chess against it and see a reaction.
A programmer back in the day, so when I was writing code, it was the algorithms were if this, then that.
Right.
X or whatever it may be. Right. But you had to guess. Right. You had to use your best instance. And then it got smarter and smarter and smarter, and libraries to do bigger and better things. All that is being automated. And so now you have to know how to use that stuff. So either software works for you or you work for software, and once the software takes over, you're gone. Right? So unless you understand that, You don't understand that the nature of work is changing. The nature of employment is going to change. And from a business, from a stock perspective, if you're in the Fortune 500, if you're an S&P 500 company, if you're in the Dow 30, right? If you're one of the bigger companies, you already know this. And in talking to a lot of these big companies, they know their workforces, and given the supply and demand of stocks, the supply is shrinking,
right,
and the demand is going up just as the economy grows. That's probably good news for stocks over the long term, but it's bad news for employment, and it's bad news for people who are disrupted.
Well, and that's part of the thing, right? Is that there's a time when GM was the largest employer, and the companies like GM was what employment looked like. If Facebook's what it looks like, the revenue per employee at Facebook is infinitely larger, right, than any automaker could ever make or any manufacturer could make.
The difference is the time lag, right? The timeline. So what took 20 years before and then became 10 could be 5 or 3. And so when you start getting that massive amount of disruption in employment, what do? That's the whole thing he ran on, right? We're going to get you jobs. And if you last 4 years, right, the whole nature of employment is going to change. There aren't manufacturing jobs coming back. There aren't more coal mining jobs coming back. No matter what you do to the EPA, a lot of these jobs are going to be gone. Now, there's still physical things. If you do infrastructure, you can kind of, buy some time, right, spend more, get temporary jobs to build roads, build bridges, which is all fine and good, right? I think you can get a return on much of those things. But you're going to have to recognize that there are going to be more people out of work. So,
through this innovation.
Yeah.
So essentially what you made the case for is education and job training for grown-ups.
No.
No?
No, I think that won't matter, right? What are you going to go back and learn to do?
What it takes, right? I mean, whether it's finance, whether it's software programming.
Finance, that's the easiest thing. You just take the data and have it spit out whatever you need, right? I personally think there's going to be a greater demand in 10 years for liberal arts majors than there were for programming majors and maybe even engineering, because when the data is all being spit out for you, options are being spit out for you, you need a different perspective in order to have a different view of the data. And so having someone who's more of a freer thinker, and because if automation is being automated, you just learn the tax rules. You just feed the automation the tax rules, and it does the rest for you.
So English majors of the world should celebrate?
I think English, philosophy, foreign language majors, maybe not now, they're going to starve for a while, but that's not even the real issue, right? The real issue is if 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 5 million people have their jobs disrupted, and we see the direction everything is going and how quickly it's going. What are you going to do with them, right? And so what I've said to the administration, and I've volunteered to help, and look, I've told his assistant, not President Trump directly, I've told people around him, I told people I know, look, I may disagree with 99% of what the guy does and how he does it, but I'm an American citizen first and last, and so I'll help wherever I can, and I want him to be successful. But what I've told them and have repeated multiple times is there's a program called AmeriCorps, right? And AmeriCorps right now has a year of service, and it pays kids, $12,000, and they go do socially impactful things, but they live 9 people in the house, right? And that's how they're able to afford it. That's not going to cut it anymore. Those same programs, instead of having a $1.2 billion budget, needs to be a $15 or $20 billion budget, and that amount needs to be $30,000 a year. And that displaced worker in Beattyville, Kentucky, can go around teaching kids to read as part of the AmeriCorps program, and there can be 20 in Beattyville, there can be 1 million in New York City, or New York State, whatever it may be, and that's what they're doing, right? They're going out and having a social impact. It's almost like the Tennessee Valley Authority, where there was make work and building
WPA programs.
Yeah.
Because AmeriCorps, it was closely modeled on Peace Corps, right? Same idea,
but for domestic, right. But having people come in and have a social impact and making it a real job, like you said, the WPA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, right? That's what we're going to need, and he doesn't see that. And so if you don't start, maybe he'll learn it. Maybe maybe I don't know what's going on, and maybe I'm misevaluating his ability to absorb this stuff.
Well, make America great again. Make America great. Something it isn't necessarily backwards looking. Make it great again is.
Yeah, but deal with the issues.
Right.
Regardless of how you want to brand it, you got to deal with the issues. And the issues are the nature of work is changing, automation is being automated. What looked like a great job graduating from college today may not be a great job graduating from college 5 years or 10 years from now. Having had a great job programming for the last 15 years, being a Python expert and integrating to this and that,
right.
you know, might have been a great job for those 15 years. You might be out of work in 5 years. And I know I'm being kind of fatalistic on this, and hopefully I'm wrong, but in the event that there's a greater than 0% chance I'm right, somebody's got to start dealing with this stuff and recognize it and dealing with the macro issues. And to me, it's one of the most critical issues from a job perspective that we face, and he just doesn't get it.
Do you think we saw anything different from the last president?
Yeah, I mean, look, they came out with a paper saying a lot of these same things. And so, yeah, I mean, look, for all President Obama's faults, at least he made the effort to learn. I mean, when he first came out, when Obama was first elected, I was tearing him apart. I was tearing him apart on the SEC, what he was doing for entrepreneurs or lack thereof, the fact that, it seemed to be that everything got tougher for entrepreneurs and business. And you can go back in my blog, and I had no problems tearing him apart, just like I have no problems now. But to Obama's credit, he brought me in, even though I was being chased by the SEC, and he didn't commit to do anything and didn't change anything, but at least he listened, and he responded in a manner that made me think he understood. And he also brought in not just me, but tech guy after tech guy after tech guy to try to understand all these things.
Well, look at Megyn Kelly.